Yoruichi Shihoin's Zanpakuto is one of Bleach's closest guarded secrets. Despite being a former captain of the Gotei 13 and a prominent supporting protagonist in almost every major arc of the story, Yoruichi is completely unique in that she never uses a Zanpakuto in battle at all. Now that's not to say she doesn't have one, in fact we have actually seen her with one, but only once, in a very brief flashback with Urahara, and only in a single panel at that. Extremely proficient in Hakuda, the hand-to-hand combat art of the Shinigami, as well as the Kido-energized power of Shunko, it is true that Yoruichi doesn't seem, at least, to have an innate need for a Zanpakuto, capable of going toe-to-toe with monstrously powerful enemies using just her fists. But it is absolutely odd nonetheless. Most Shinigami typically evangelize the relationship, the partnership, between a Shinigami and their Zanpakuto, a shared connection. To forego one entirely is absolutely alien in the world of Bleach. Even Kenpachi Zaraki, who famously couldn't hear his Zanpakuto, still wielded a blade. Arguably Yoruichi's closest comparison in the series, outside of Yushiro Shihoin, who we only see for a very small amount of time, is her protege, Soifon, who also seemingly favours using hand-to-hand combat in battle, but even she pairs that with an incredibly dangerous Shikai in Suzumebachi, even if her Bankai is a total anomaly. So, what's going on here? How can a Shinigami, and one so venerated as Yoruichi, realistically exist without a Zanpakuto? Will we ever see it in Bleach? And what could its abilities be? Are they simply really weak, or do they just not suit Yoruichi's preferred style at all? It's definitely an interesting scenario. I struggle, personally, to imagine a situation where an experienced Shinigami can't find a single benefit in utilising their Zanpakuto at all, but let's see. In today's video, we're going to try and tackle the question posed by Yoruichi's Zanpakuto. What could it be? Why doesn't she use it? I've come up with a few ideas for what her Shikai could be, along with a couple of Bankai as well, but unlike our Bankai theory crafting videos, these really are just complete and utter speculation. We've got absolutely nothing to go off at all, so they are just totally for fun. Let me know, as always, of course, your ideas down in the comments below. And yes, there will be spoilers for the 1000 Year Blood War arc of Bleach in the video to come. So, to begin, let's start by answering the question that's kind of at the crux of this issue. Why doesn't Yoruichi use her Zanpakuto? Well, while Yoruichi's Zanpakuto, or lack of one, is never really addressed in the source material, perhaps unsurprisingly, the answer can instead be found in the light novel Can't Fear Your Own World. In something of a throwaway remark, Yoruichi reveals that yes, she does have a Zanpakuto, a regular, normal Zanpakuto just like everybody else. But she believes she is stronger when fighting with taijutsu alone, taijutsu being basically unarmed hand-to-hand combat. However, because of this, her Zanpakuto frequently sulks, so she has to spend time pacifying it every single day. While this is a mere tease of the truth, it is rather interesting. Yoruichi seems to at least care about her Zanpakuto and how it feels to a degree, despite electing to not use it in battle at all. Considering what we know about the relationship between Shinigami and Zanpakuto, especially what we learn in the 1000 Year Blood War arc thanks to Oetsu Nimaya and the Royal Palace, this is very surprising to me. Honestly, I would have thought a dynamic like this would be extremely toxic for the Zanpakuto and detrimental and even damaging to the Shinigami overall. Also, Yoruichi explicitly says that she's stronger when fighting with taijutsu alone. To me, this implies that she could fight using her hands and feet alongside wielding her Zanpakuto, but to do so would weaken her combat skills greatly to the point where she is simply better off not using the Zanpakuto alongside her Hakuda skills. This doesn't feel like much insight, but it is likely that YORUICHI'S ZANPAKUTO takes the form of something that hinders her athleticism in battle. We've seen from numerous fights that YORUICHI'S preferred style is to get up close and personal with her enemies, combining her incredible speed with ferocious punches and kicks, often imbued with lightning thanks to Shunko. Could it be that her Zanpakuto somehow immobilizes her? It feels a little bit stale to rehash the idea that the leader of the Omnitsukido hates an aspect of her Zanpakuto. After all, we have this with Soifon's Bankai. But while a Zanpakuto is supposed to reflect its wielder, as it is quite literally them, it is every facet of them, the blade is me, it is even parts of them they might not like or find useful. Soifon is a calm, calculated assassin, as reflected by her Shikai, but her Bankai, while still emphasizing a directive to kill, takes after her explosive temper. YORUICHI could be similar. Her Zanpakuto could reflect a portion of her personality that doesn't help in battle. Before moving on to the Zanpakuto ideas themselves, let's take a very brief look at some of YORUICHI's previous fights and what they might tell us. When she arrived to fight Aizen in the Fate Karakura Town arc, YORUICHI was wearing brand new armour on both her arms and her legs. I remember thinking this could be her Shikai when I first saw it, but of course it turned out to simply be an invention of Kisuke's, designed to combat the iron skin of the Ranka. What's interesting about this is that YORUICHI quickly learns that hand-to-hand combat won't be ideal against these enemies. Even though she quickly overpowers Yami, she seriously injures herself on his skin. Yet despite this, she still opts to ignore her Zanpakuto completely and simply wear protective armour to continue fighting as she normally would. Then you've got her final battle in the series, her showdown with Askin in Varvelt, where we see the extent of YORUICHI's Shunko capabilities, seemingly fused with her cat transformation, a result of her Shihoin lineage. However, when I see this battle, I can't help but wish this was just her Zanpakuto instead. I mean, I think it works really well. The Shikai could easily be Raijin Senkei, while the Bankai could transform her further into Kokubyo Senbi. Obviously, that isn't what Kubo went for, but to me it felt like the perfect two-stage associated ability for a Zanpakuto for her, laid out on a silver platter. Anyway, with that context out of the way, let's take a look at some Zanpakuto designs. Like I said, as we have literally nothing to go on, these won't necessarily be too fleshed out. But I wanted to put some theories down on paper as to why she wouldn't use her Zanpakuto at all, while trying to keep it true to YORUICHI herself, and hopefully that's reflected in these ideas. I want to begin with an idea that's not that serious, but way back in 2013, I designed a pretty rough idea for YORUICHI Shikai, which, looking back, is rather basic now, but I liked it then. Upon activation with the release command Slice Away, YORUICHI's katana transformed into a pair of clawed gauntlets connected via a ribbon. The claws are charged with electrical power, and at the same time, YORUICHI's eyes become cat-like for the duration. Like I said, it's pretty basic, and I never went any further with it than that. Obviously, the main inspiration was YORUICHI's cat transformation, but I also wanted Soifon's Suzumebachi to feel like it was inspired by this Shikai, hence the gauntlets as well. Regardless, that's just a bit of a throwback. It's crazy though that 10 years later we still have no idea whatsoever what her Zanpakuto is. Anyway, moving on to some of the actual Zanpakuto ideas I have, each of these represents a reason why YORUICHI wouldn't want to use it. It's odd, but that's the kind of approach we have to take with this character. There has to be a valid reason for her to never want to use this weapon. First of all, let's look at what kind of a fighter YORUICHI is. She's all about a deadly mixture of physical strength and speed. YORUICHI often blitzes her opponents, attempting to catch them off guard, likely a result of her years in the Omnitsukido, before destroying them with a flurry of physical attacks, both furious punches and kicks. Sometimes these attacks will even be empowered with Kido, YORUICHI's Shunko taking the form of lightning blasts. So, much in the same way as Soifon's Bankai slows her down greatly and prevents her from moving around easily, while also making it impossible for her to hide, the first idea for YORUICHI'S ZANPAKUTO is something incredibly bulky and slow, the total antithesis of her preferred style. With this idea, YORUICHI exclaims the release command "beat 'em up", and then releases her ZANPAKUTO, the blade transforming into an enormous arm that affixes itself to her. The best comparison I can think of, and really the inspiration for this, is Kukaku Shiba's Orient Society design from Bleach Brave Souls. This enormous arm provides the physical power boost that YORUICHI is looking for, and it can even be augmented with Shunko. By channeling electrical energy through this enormous cannon-like arm, YORUICHI is able to deal an explosive amount of damage with her massive punches. The major issue, though, is the arm is immensely heavy. Even for someone as strong as YORUICHI, it becomes very tough to move around with, and she kind of becomes one big target. The arm is therefore a liability for a fighter as lithe and nimble as the goddess of Flash, and so she's simply better off without it. At this point, YORUICHI has diligently trained herself to the point where her own fists are almost as brutal anyway, and crucially she can throw punches 100 times faster without it. The Bankai for this ZANPAKUTO could be a humorous reference to Soifon's own. YORUICHI's colossal arm turns into an actual cannon from which she fires several mortar-like fists that come raining down from the sky. Again, completely useless in accordance with YORUICHI's own fighting style, but potentially strong nonetheless. So that's the first idea. Like I said, I'm trying to come up with ideas that do seem like they might fit YORUICHI, but don't work for whatever reason. The second idea is potentially a cool one, but again, it doesn't jive with YORUICHI's preferred fighting style. But with this ZANPAKUTO idea, we transform YORUICHI into a long-range fighter with the release command SAW. Maybe she becomes a sniper of some kind, that way you can still include a stealth element, and maybe YORUICHI even blasts highly concentrated bolts of electricity charged via her Shunko powers. Here's the thing though, why would YORUICHI even be proficient in Shunko anymore if she doesn't fight primarily with her hands and feet? I think YORUICHI would resent a ZANPAKUTO that forces her to fight almost exclusively at very long range. Interestingly, I don't think any Shinigami wields a bow and arrow, and I can see why, that's obviously the Quincy's thing, but maybe YORUICHI should be the one to break the mold. It's possible YORUICHI's ZANPAKUTO transforms into several kunai, again to fit with her stealthy ninja fighting style, and again forcing her to stay at least mid-range distance away when fighting an enemy. In her battle against Soifon, YORUICHI utilises equipment more readily, slinging several onken, which are short blades, at her opponent via a sweeping kick. It seems to me that while these throwing blades wouldn't necessarily be antithetical to how YORUICHI likes to fight, they also don't feel like they'd be as strong or even reliable as a simple physical assault from YORUICHI herself. If anything, I think YORUICHI would rather use them as she does in her battle with Soifon, as an addition, a complement to her actual fighting style. If her ZANPAKUTO transformed into kunai or onken or something like that, I think it would honestly just be a little underwhelming in comparison to her actual abilities. I'm not entirely sure what the Bankai would be for this form. Maybe YORUICHI acquires a pair of fans, within each slot several kunai, and she's able to throw multiple knives and blades at once in quick succession, the blades reappearing within the fans as soon as they are loosed. I like the idea of YORUICHI having a weapon that allows her to move fluidly. I could see her dancing among the enemies, bringing them down with grace and ease. Ultimately though, YORUICHI is a very straightforward woman. I think she'd rather do away with the pomp of an ability like that and just smash her opponent's face in with raw strength. Next up is an intriguing one. A ZANPAKUTO is supposed to be the truest reflection of a Shinigami's soul. As we mentioned earlier, Soifon's Bankai reflects her explosive temper, and it hinders her as a result. Now we know, thanks to Kubo's Q&A, that YORUICHI's cat transformation is related to her Shihoin bloodline. It's intrinsic to her. During her Shunko transformation, Urahara notes how fickle she's become, and how unpredictable and changeable her Reiatsu has become as a result. What if that cat-like unpredictability has transferred over to her Zanpakuto? Maybe the Zanpakuto spirit itself is completely unpredictable, making it impossible to work with. Or maybe whatever weapon Yoruichi has is difficult to wield properly as a result. Imagine again, for example, Yoruichi Shikai transforms into cat claws, going back to the very first idea we had from 2013. Now, ordinarily, these razor-sharp claws deal a lot of damage and complement her Hakuda-focused fighting style pretty perfectly. But if her fickle tendencies rear their heads, maybe the claws retract themselves at totally random intervals. Perhaps during a fight, Yoruichi's Zanpakuto has changed its mind one too many times in the past and retracted the claws during a desperate moment, leaving Yoruichi vulnerable to a sudden hit. And due to this unpredictability, Yoruichi has simply decided that it is not worth the risk to fight with her Zanpakuto. I'm not too sure about this one though, because the idea that the Zanpakuto sulks because Yoruichi doesn't want to use it would imply that it is fully game to help her out. It wants to be of use, so I'm not entirely sold on that one, but it's an idea nonetheless. Another idea would be a Zanpakuto based entirely around Yoruichi's stealthy nature as the former head of the Omnitz Kiddo. In this form, using the release command Conceal, Yoruichi is able to summon a small tornado of leaves, a little like Senna from the first Bleach movie, and is able to hide within them, vanishing from sight. Yoruichi can use the winds as a smokescreen of sorts, moving through them like a ghost before striking the enemy. What's interesting about this though is that Yoruichi is actually very rarely stealthy in her approach, at least not fully. She does have a tendency to attack her opponents out of nowhere initially, as happened with both Aizen and Askin, but once the fight is on, Yoruichi is very much an in-your-face, head-on fighter. If these swirling winds and darting leaves forced Yoruichi to fight on the back foot, I don't think she'd see the use in them. Plus, as the goddess of Flash already, Yoruichi has proven she doesn't need tricks like these to get close to her enemies in the first place. It's also possible that attacking at all, or activating Shunko completely dispels the whirlwind, rendering it useless. The Bankai for this Zanpakuto would be fairly simple, I think. During her battle with Soifon, when the Omnitz Kiddo are summoned to take Yoruichi down, the former 2nd Division captain defeats them all in a blur, becoming nothing more than a haze and a flurry of colour. The Bankai for this Zanpakuto would be something similar, at least visually. Yoruichi covers the entire battlefield in this disconcerting whirlwind of leaves and smoke before picking off her enemies one by one with ease, and all you can see from the outside looking in is just this blur disappearing, taking people out of the equation. Finally, the last idea I have is probably the craziest, but it's also the idea that could take on the most forms. Yoruichi activates her Shikai with the release command Let's Go, and summons several shadows to her side. These shadows can take the form of really anything, whether they're cat spirits, or even little spiritual Kodama, or even shadowy versions of Yoruichi herself. Again, the idea of a moving shadow relates to Yoruichi's stealthy, almost shinobi-style roots, while the ability to summon spiritual animals is a reference to the secret technique of her lineage. Combining the two does seem quite fitting for me, and these shadows could have any litany of abilities at their disposal: shape-shifting, teleportation, anything of the sort. The issue, of course, comes from how these shadows work and operate. First of all, I don't think Yoruichi would want to relinquish control like that in the midst of a battle, but secondly, and more importantly, these shadowy spirits, these partners, sap her energy in order to stick around, to the point where she wouldn't be able to use Shunko even if she wanted. That energy would just be kind of drained and stolen from her to keep them going. The longer these shadows are active, the less Yoruichi is able to move, and eventually she finds herself completely worn out. I think, knowing what we do about Yoruichi, how she's so strong-willed and fierce, that she'd much rather take the fight into her own hands. She relies on her own power, and I can't see her wanting to give that up. In her Bankai for this form, well, I'm not really sure. I like the idea of Yoruichi becoming her cat self for the Bankai of one of these ideas, so for this one, she becomes her cat self, absorbing the many shadows that she summoned so far, to increase her own power and speed by that much. I kind of like the idea as well of a small black cat going absolutely crazy on the battlefield. Maybe her claw swipes are now imbued with power themselves depending on how many shadows she drew back into herself, and she's now sending streaks of yellow lightning in jagged lines screaming across the air. But those are just some ideas for what Yoruichi's Zanpakuto could be, and why she doesn't like fighting with it, why she believes she's stronger using hand-to-hand combat alone. Of course, it's possible that her Zanpakuto could be an amalgamation of several of these ideas, or much more likely, it's nothing like this at all, and it's absolutely none of them. Either way, this was an interesting and quite a fun video to make, trying to come up with Zanpakuto ideas that, on paper, made sense for the character, but ultimately had to have some kind of fatal flaw that meant they didn't line up with her at all. Something that she could realistically have, but not want to use. As always, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Do you like any of my ideas for Yoruichi's Zanpakuto? Do these ideas make sense for why she wouldn't want to use it over her own hand-to-hand abilities? I'd love to hear your own thoughts and, of course, your own ideas down in the comments below. That's it for the video, guys. I really do hope you enjoyed it. I want to say a massive thank you as always, and a huge shout out to all of the people supporting me over on Patreon, all of my Patreon supporters. Again, I really do appreciate each and every one of you so very much. If you like what I do here on the channel, you can go and support me on Patreon as well. You can get your name in the credits, and you can get videos just like this one totally ad-free. But as always, guys, again, I do really appreciate the support. Thank you all so very much. And until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.